Imagine this. You're standing at the edge of a cliff, looking out over a vast, endless abyss. Below lies darkness, uncertainty, pain, and regret. But what brought you here? What choices, what unseen forces, what silent compromises led you to this moment? Many of us don't realize that we're standing at this very edge, teetering closer with every small decision we make. There's a warning, an urgent one, that we cannot ignore. Padre Pio, a man known for his unshakable faith and deep connection with God, spoke about certain sins. Sins so dangerous, so destructive, that they don't just harm our souls but ripple through every aspect of our lives. These sins, hidden in plain sight, have the power to steal your peace, destroy your relationships, and block God's grace from reaching you. But here's the thing. Most people don't even realize they're committing them. They think, it's just the way life is, or asterisk, everyone does it, so why not me? Asterisk, yet, deep inside, there's a gnawing discomfort. A sense that something's not right. Maybe you've felt it too. Sleepless nights, strained relationships, or that haunting feeling of emptiness that no success, no possession, no distraction can ever fill. Let me ask you this. Have you ever wondered why certain areas of your life seem stuck, like no matter how hard you try, you're met with failure, frustration, or even disaster? What if the answer lies not in what you're missing but in what you're carrying? Sins you've allowed to take root, silently suffocating the blessings God wants to pour into your life. These sins aren't obvious at first. They disguise themselves as ambition, self-care, or even necessity. But they have one goal: to separate you from God. And the worst part? The longer they stay hidden, the stronger their grip becomes. But you don't have to stay trapped. There's hope, a way out. Padre Pio didn't just warn us about these sins. He showed us how to overcome them. And here's the promise. By the end of this video, you'll not only know what these cursed sins are, but also how to break free from their chains. You'll learn the steps to rediscover the joy, peace, and fulfillment that only God can provide. If you've ever felt like your life is off course, like there's a weight holding you back, or like you're missing the blessings meant for you, stay with me. Because what we're about to uncover might just change everything. Before we dive in, make sure to subscribe to this channel. Here, we share powerful truths and practical wisdom inspired by Padre Pio and the teachings of the Catholic faith. Together, we can navigate the challenges of life and grow closer to God. Hit that subscribe button now, because the journey we're about to take is one you won't want to miss. Now, let's uncover the truths that have the power to set you free. James's story began in a small, picturesque town surrounded by rolling hills and dotted with cobblestone streets. Everyone in town seemed to know James. He was the kind of man people admired. He owned a thriving trade business, dealing in fine goods that brought prosperity not just to himself but to many in the community. His sharp eye for quality and his natural talent for negotiation made him a rising star among the merchants. People spoke of his success with a mix of admiration and envy, but James was more than just a businessman. He was seen as a family man and a man of faith. Every Sunday, James attended church with his wife, Elizabeth, and their two children, Daniel and Sarah. They always sat in the front pew, their hands folded in prayer as the priest spoke of God's love and the importance of humility. To those watching, James appeared to have it all: wealth, a loving family, and a strong connection with God. But appearances can be deceiving. James's faith, while outwardly strong, was built more on routine than on true devotion. He went to church because it was expected of him. He prayed because it was what good Christians did. But deep inside, James began to equate his material success with God's blessings. He believed that his growing wealth and influence were signs that he was living a righteous life. Asterisk, why else would God allow me to prosper so much? Asterisk, he often thought. Over time, this belief began to shift. What started as gratitude for God's provision slowly turned into pride in his own abilities. James began to see himself as the architect of his success. If I can achieve this much on my own, he reasoned, asterisk, why not aim for more? Asterisk. The turning point came on a warm spring morning when James was approached with an opportunity that could change everything. A wealthy trader from a neighboring city offered James an exclusive contract. a deal so lucrative that it would solidify his position as the most successful merchant in the region. The contract, however, came with conditions. To secure the deal, James would have to engage in practices that went against his values, inflating prices, cutting corners on quality, and misleading his competitors. At first, James hesitated. He remembered the teachings of his faith, the sermons about honesty and integrity. He thought of his family, who looked up to him as a man of principle. But the allure of success was too strong. "It's just one deal," he told himself. Everyone does it. Besides, I'll use the profits to provide for my family and give more to the church. With that decision, James began a journey down a dangerous path. The deal was a success, and the profits rolled in, but something had shifted within him. The thrill of achievement became addictive. He found himself constantly looking for the next big opportunity, the next way to outshine his competitors. James's focus on his business grew to the point where everything else started to fade into the background. He spent long hours at his office, poring over numbers and crafting strategies. Meals with his family became hurried and distracted. His once vibrant relationship with Elizabeth grew strained, as she often sat alone at the dinner table, waiting for James to come home. His children, Daniel and Sarah, began to notice the change too. Daniel, who had always admired his father, felt a growing distance between them. Sarah, once the apple of her father's eye, stopped running to him with her little triumphs, sensing that he no longer had the time to listen. James's spiritual life also suffered. Sundays at church became an obligation rather than a source of renewal. His prayers, once filled with gratitude, became rare and transactional. "Lord, help me close this deal," he would say, without giving it much thought. The warmth and peace he once felt in God's presence seemed to slip further and further away. The breaking point came one evening when James returned home to find his house unusually quiet. His family was gone. On the kitchen table lay a note in Elizabeth's familiar handwriting. "James, we love you, but we feel like we've lost you. We need some time away to think and to heal. Please, take this time to reflect on what truly matters." James stood there in stunned silence, the note trembling in his hand. His grand home, filled with expensive furnishings and symbols of his success, now felt cold and hollow. For the first time in years, he was alone, truly alone. That night, James wandered through his home, his mind racing with questions. How did I get here? How did I let things fall apart? He thought about the choices he had made, the values he had compromised, and the people he had hurt along the way. His heart was heavy with regret, but he didn't know where to turn. As he sat in his study, surrounded by ledgers and contracts, James's eyes fell on a Bible that had been gathering dust on the shelf. He reached for it, hesitating for a moment before opening its pages. His eyes landed on the words from Matthew 6 verse 21. "For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." Those words pierced his soul. For the first time, James saw clearly what he had become. He realized that his treasure, his heart, had been consumed by greed, and it had cost him everything that truly mattered. This is where James's story takes a turn, a journey toward redemption and restoration. But what will it take for him to break free from the grip of greed and find his way back to God and his family? Before we continue, let me ask you, have you ever felt like you were chasing something only to realize it was leading you further from what truly matters? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your perspective. And if James's story is resonating with you, don't miss the next chapter of his journey. Hit the subscribe button now so you can join us as we uncover the lessons that can transform lives. Together, we'll explore the path to peace, purpose, and faith. Let's keep walking this road together. James's descent into the grip of greed was not immediate. It was gradual, like a slow erosion that wears away the foundation of a sturdy house. At first, the changes in him were subtle, barely noticeable to anyone but those who truly loved him. He was still the same charismatic, driven businessman who commanded respect in every room he entered. But beneath the surface, something darker was beginning to take hold. As James's wealth grew, so did his appetite for more. Deals that once seemed satisfactory no longer excited him. He began to crave bigger numbers, more recognition, and greater power. His mind became a battlefield, where his faith and values clashed with his ambition and desire. Unfortunately, the latter began to win. It started with small compromises. When a client asked about the origin of a product, James exaggerated its quality to secure a higher price. He told himself it wasn't a lie, just a clever marketing tactic. When a competitor struggled, James seized the opportunity to undercut their business, rationalizing that it was just part of the game. The line between ambition and greed blurred until it was all but invisible. His family began to feel the strain. Elizabeth, his wife, watched as the man she had married drifted further away. James's once warm and attentive demeanor was replaced by cold calculation and impatience. He spent long nights at his desk, poring over spreadsheets and strategizing for the next big deal. Elizabeth would bring him dinner, only to leave it untouched as he muttered about margins and profits. Their children, Daniel and Sarah, grew quiet and withdrawn. Daniel, who had once idolized his father, began to see him as distant and unapproachable. Sarah stopped asking James to attend her school plays or soccer games, knowing he would have an excuse ready. The laughter that had once filled their home was replaced by a heavy silence. But James barely noticed. He was consumed by his business, by the endless pursuit of more. His success brought him recognition in the community, invitations to exclusive events, and admiration from those who envied his achievements. Yet, the more he gained, the more hollow he felt. One day, an opportunity arose that seemed too good to be true. A foreign investor was interested in a partnership that would expand James's business internationally. The deal promised unimaginable profits, the kind that could solidify James's legacy for generations. But there was a catch. To secure the deal, James would have to falsify documents, inflate his company's value, and mislead his current partners. James hesitated at first. He thought of his family, his faith, and the teachings he had once held dear. But the allure of success was overpowering. He convinced himself that this deal was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, one he couldn't afford to pass up. "This isn't just for me," he told himself. It's for my family, for their future. With that justification, James went all in. He poured every resource into the deal, neglecting his existing clients and burning bridges with longtime partners. He became a man possessed, driven by the promise of wealth and power. But greed, like a fire, is never satisfied. The deal that seemed so promising began to unravel. The foreign investor turned out to be fraudulent, and James's forged documents were exposed. News of the scandal spread quickly, and James's reputation, once untouchable, was destroyed. The fallout was swift and devastating. Clients abandoned him, contracts were canceled, and lawsuits piled up. Within weeks, James went from being one of the most respected businessmen in town to a man on the brink of financial ruin. His once thriving empire crumbled, leaving him with nothing but debt and regret. At home, the situation was no better. Elizabeth had grown weary of the man James had become. She tried to support him through the initial fallout, but his obsession with salvaging his reputation only pushed her further away. One evening, after yet another argument, Elizabeth packed her bags and took the children to her parents' house. James was left alone in the empty shell of what had once been a home filled with love and laughter. He sat in the dim light of his study, surrounded by papers and bills, his head in his hands. For the first time, he felt the full weight of his choices. He thought about the lies he had told, the people he had hurt, and the faith he had abandoned. The words of the priest from his childhood echoed in his mind. What does it profit a man to gain the whole world, but forfeit his soul? Mark 8 verse 36. James's heart ached with regret. He realized that his pursuit of wealth had cost him everything that truly mattered: his integrity, his family, and his relationship with God. He felt empty, lost, and utterly alone. But even in his despair, there was a small flicker of hope. James remembered the teachings of his faith, the stories of redemption and forgiveness. He thought of the prodigal son, who had squandered everything but was welcomed back with open arms by his father. Could there still be hope for him? Could he find a way to rebuild his life, to make amends, and to rediscover the peace he had lost? James's story doesn't end here. It's a journey of reflection, repentance, and redemption. But before we continue, let me ask you, Have you ever felt consumed by something, whether it's work, ambition, or the pursuit of success, only to realize it's taking you further from what truly matters? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story could be the inspiration someone else needs. And if this journey is resonating with you, take a moment to subscribe to this channel. Together, we'll explore the dangers of sin, the hope of redemption, and the lessons that can transform lives. Don't miss the next chapter of James's story. It's one you won't want to miss. Hit that subscribe button now, and let's continue this journey together. James was at a crossroads in life. His world had fallen apart so suddenly that he could barely comprehend the full scope of his downfall. The lavish home, the business deals, the respect, everything was gone in the blink of an eye. The betrayal of his own values, the lies he had told to build his empire, and the people he had hurt, left him hollow, a shadow of the man he once was. He was no longer a man of ambition. He was a man lost in his mistakes, desperately seeking a way out, but unsure where to turn. He was desperate for some kind of redemption, something to anchor him to a purpose greater than himself. On one particularly cold and lonely evening, when the weight of his failures threatened to consume him, James found himself wandering the quiet streets of the city, his mind spinning with thoughts of guilt and regret. His thoughts raced. He couldn't escape the shame, the overwhelming feeling that he had lost everything he ever held dear. His wife, his children, his friends, they were all slipping away. He couldn't help but wonder if he had ruined his chance at happiness, if he had burned every bridge beyond repair. As he walked, his feet led him to a small, dimly lit church on the corner of a narrow alley. James didn't know why he walked inside. He wasn't a regular churchgoer. In fact, his visits had been few and far between in recent years, mostly on holidays or when it was convenient. But tonight was different. There was an unexplainable pull in his heart, a force that drew him toward the church, and he had no idea why. Inside, the church was peaceful and quiet. The scent of incense lingered in the air, and the soft glow of candlelight flickered from every corner. The sound of the priest's voice reverberated through the walls as he spoke in a low, soothing tone, reading from the scriptures. James sat in the back pew, almost hesitant to disturb the sacred space with his presence. He wasn't sure what he was expecting, but somehow, it felt like this was the only place where he might find some kind of solace. As the priest read, James' attention was drawn to a picture on the wall at the front of the church. It was a large framed image of Padre Pio, the famous Italian priest who had dedicated his life to serving God, despite facing immense personal suffering. James stared at the image for a long time, mesmerized by the intense expression on Padre Pio's face. There was something about the saint's eyes, something that spoke directly to James's soul. It was as if the picture was alive, communicating something that James could not put into words. The priest's voice suddenly broke through James's trance, reading the words from the Gospel. Asterisk, for what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world, yet loses his soul? Asterisk, Matthew 16 verse 26. The words hit James like a lightning bolt. He had heard those words before, of course. They were familiar, something he had probably heard countless times in sermons. But this time, they carried a weight that shook him to his core. He could feel the truth of them deep within him. All the money, the success, the admiration. What had it all been worth? In the grand scheme of things, had any of it truly mattered? James's mind raced, trying to process what was happening to him. He could almost hear a voice within him saying, asterisk, this is it. This is the moment you've been waiting for. Asterisk, he couldn't ignore the pull of the words any longer. His life, his choices, had led him to this very moment. It was as if everything had been orchestrated for him to walk into that church, to hear those words, and to be confronted with the truth that had been eluding him for so long. The truth was undeniable. His greed, his ambition, had become his idol. He had placed his desires for wealth, success, and recognition above everything else in his life, above his family, his friends, and even his relationship with God. His pursuit of material gain had separated him from the very things that mattered most. And now, sitting in that quiet church, he realized the terrible price he had paid. He glanced again at the image of Padre Pio. The saint had lived a life full of sacrifice, devotion, and humility. He had faced trials, even physical suffering, and yet he had remained faithful to God through it all. James couldn't help but feel a deep sense of reverence for this man who had lived a life so different from his own. Padre Pio's story was one of transformation, of overcoming suffering, and ultimately, of finding peace in God's grace. James began to reflect on his own life, the choices he had made, the compromises he had allowed himself to fall into. He thought about his family and how far he had drifted from them. He thought about the lies, the manipulation, and the people he had hurt along the way. All of it, he realized, was for nothing. All his success had been built on a foundation of deceit and selfishness. And now, that foundation was crumbling. But in that moment of despair, there was also a flicker of hope. The words of the gospel echoed in his mind, reminding him that it was not too late to turn things around. James knew that he couldn't undo the past, but maybe, just maybe, there was a way forward, a way to reclaim what he had lost and rebuild his life, this time on the solid foundation of faith and humility. He closed his eyes and prayed, for the first time in years. It was a simple prayer, but it came from the depths of his heart. God, forgive me. Help me to find my way back to you. Help me to rebuild my life on what truly matters. As he finished praying, James felt a strange peace settle over him. It wasn't the kind of peace that comes from external circumstances or success. It was the kind of peace that only comes from within, from knowing that you are forgiven, that you are loved by a God who cares deeply for you. In that moment, James knew that he had found the truth he had been searching for all along. James left the church that night with a renewed sense of purpose. He knew that his journey wouldn't be easy. The road to redemption was long and filled with challenges, but he also knew that he didn't have to walk it alone. With the help of God, and guided by the example of Padre Pio's life, he was determined to change. It wouldn't happen overnight, but with every step he took toward humility, honesty, and faith, he knew he was moving closer to the man he was meant to be. If you're struggling with something similar, with the weight of your own mistakes or regrets, know that there is always a way back. The story of James is one of hope, a reminder that no matter how far we've fallen, God's grace is always there to lift us up. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Have you ever had a moment where the truth hit you like a ton of bricks, making you realize that things needed to change? Leave a comment below and share your story. And if this message resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Together, we can continue this journey of growth, transformation, and redemption. You're not alone. Let's walk this path together. James sat quietly in his modest living room, the soft hum of life outside his window barely breaking the silence. His home, once a reflection of success and opulence, now felt hollow. The lavish furniture, the sparkling kitchen, the grand staircase, all seemed like ghosts of a past life, distant reminders of a man who had once believed that material wealth could fill the void in his heart. But now, everything was different. The emptiness that had once been overshadowed by his constant pursuit of success was now glaringly clear. He was no longer the man who had been consumed by his desire for wealth, the man who had lied, deceived, and sacrificed relationships for the sake of building an empire. No, James had undergone a transformation, a change of heart that was not only profound but entirely necessary if he was to rebuild his life on a foundation of integrity, humility, and faith. It had started that fateful evening when he walked into the small church, feeling the weight of his past on his shoulders. The words of the gospel, "For what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world, yet loses his soul?" had struck him like a bolt of lightning, and he had realized that the pursuit of material gain had led him down a path of destruction. The very thing he had once worshipped, the pursuit of wealth, had become an idol, separating him from everything that truly mattered. But now, sitting in the quiet of his home, James knew that it was time to take action. It wasn't enough to simply feel sorry for the things he had done. He needed to make amends, to repair the brokenness in his life, and to truly change from the inside out. And for that, he would need a new perspective, a new approach to life, one that was rooted in the teachings of faith and charity. Inspiration came to him one day as he was reading about Padre Pio. The holy priest, known for his deep spirituality and compassion for others, had been an example of humility and charity throughout his life. Padre Pio had understood that true greatness wasn't found in the accumulation of wealth or power, but in the simple act of serving others, in the daily acts of love and kindness that reflect God's goodness. James knew that he had to adopt a similar mindset if he was to overcome his past. He had to stop relying on material wealth to define his worth, and instead, begin to live out the principles of charity and humility that Padre Pio had embodied. He would start small, but his goal was nothing less than a complete transformation of his heart and mind. The first step was giving away what he had once considered precious: money. For James, this was no small feat. He had spent years accumulating wealth, and the thought of parting with it seemed almost impossible. But he remembered the words of Jesus, who said, "Give to the one who asks you, and do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you." Matthew 5 verse 42. James knew that the best way to free himself from the grip of materialism was to give generously to those who were in need. It was not just about donating money, it was about shifting his mindset from one of accumulation to one of selfless giving. Every week, James began to donate a portion of his income to local charities. But it didn't stop there. He also began to volunteer his time at a homeless shelter, offering not just money, but his presence. He spent hours speaking with the residents, listening to their stories, and offering words of encouragement. Through these simple acts, James began to see the world in a new light. The sense of fulfillment he once believed only money could bring was now replaced by a deep sense of purpose in helping others. But even as he took these steps, James knew that it wasn't enough. Giving money and time was important, but he had to go deeper. He had to confront the root of his greed, the desire for control and self-sufficiency. And for that, he needed to make peace with his relationship with God. It was during this period of change that James began to embrace daily prayer. Each morning, he would wake up early to pray, often starting with a simple prayer of gratitude for the new day. But it was the rosary, the powerful prayer that had been a cornerstone of Padre Pio's life, that truly transformed his spiritual practice. As he recited the Hail Marys, meditated on the mysteries, and repeated the prayers, James found himself connecting with God in a way he never had before. The rosary wasn't just a set of prayers, it was a way of opening his heart, of surrendering his anxieties and worries to God. Through these daily prayers, James found the strength to face the challenges in his life. His mind, once consumed with thoughts of wealth and status, began to focus more on what really mattered: his relationship with God, his family, and his community. He realized that his trust had to shift from his bank account to God's provision. No longer would he place his security in the fleeting things of this world, but in the eternal love and grace of his Creator. Another key element in James's transformation was fasting. At first, the idea of fasting seemed strange. He had always been a man of comfort, indulging in food, drink, and luxury as a way to cope with the stress of his high-powered lifestyle. But fasting, James soon learned, was not about punishing himself. It was about detaching from the material world. Fasting helped him refocus on what was truly important and reminded him of the power of self-discipline. Each week, James began to fast once a week, giving up food for 24 hours. He spent that time in prayer and reflection, asking God to help him grow in humility and trust. The physical hunger he felt during those fasts was a reminder of his spiritual hunger, a hunger for God, for peace, for purpose. And each time the fast was over, James felt a deep sense of renewal, as though he had shed a layer of his old self. But perhaps the most powerful part of James's transformation was his reconciliation with those he had wronged. In the past, James had hurt people in his pursuit of wealth: clients, friends, even family members. He had lied to them, used them, and manipulated them for his own gain. The guilt of these actions had weighed heavily on him, but he knew that true healing could only come when he sought forgiveness from those he had wronged. James made a list of everyone he had hurt and began to reach out to them one by one. Some were quick to forgive him, others were skeptical, but all were moved by his sincerity. He apologized without reservation, asking for their forgiveness and promising to make amends. It wasn't easy. There were moments when James felt as though he had opened a floodgate of emotions, both his own and the pain he had caused others. But as he sought reconciliation, he found that the healing process wasn't just about mending broken relationships, it was about healing his own heart. As you read James's story, can you relate to his struggle? Have you ever felt the pull of materialism or the emptiness that comes with chasing after success at the cost of everything else? If so, what steps are you taking to transform your own life? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found James's story inspiring, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. We're on this journey of transformation together, and I can't wait to continue sharing these powerful stories with you. What part of James's story resonated with you the most? Let's talk about it. Over time, James had completely transformed his life. The path he once walked, blinded by the pursuit of wealth and the fleeting pleasures of this world, had been replaced by a deeper, more meaningful journey. As he reflected on his past, he could see just how far he had come and how much God had worked in him to change his heart. The overwhelming emptiness that had once haunted him was now filled with the warmth of God's presence. Every step forward was a step in faith, each action guided by a new understanding of the power of grace. The journey to redemption and spiritual renewal wasn't an easy one, but it was real, and the effects were undeniable. He found joy in the simplest moments of life, the laughter of his children, the warmth of a shared meal, and the quiet time spent in prayer. This was a far cry from the life he had once lived, where every decision was motivated by the desire to accumulate more wealth, climb higher on the social ladder, and secure his position in the world. Now, his priorities had shifted. He had learned the hard way that no amount of money, no achievement, could ever truly fill the void in his soul. The only thing that could do that was God. James had come to realize that wealth. When he had allowed greed to take root in his heart, it had distorted his view of the world and of himself. But in his repentance and efforts to live a more humble life, he had witnessed God's restorative power. Slowly, God had worked in him, renewing his heart, restoring his sense of peace, and bringing his family back together. The walls of pride and selfish ambition that had once separated him from those he loved had crumbled, leaving space for real, meaningful relationships. It wasn't just his family that had been restored, though. His connection to God had also been revived. James had learned to trust in God for his needs, no longer relying on his own strength or his ability to generate wealth. There was a deep sense of relief in knowing that he wasn't responsible for controlling everything. It was as if the weight he had carried for so long had been lifted, replaced by a deep peace that came from trusting in God's providence. One of the most profound realizations that came with his transformation was the understanding of the importance of surrender. For so much of his life, James had fought against surrendering control. His entire identity had been built around his achievements, his success, and his ability to control his circumstances. But surrendering his will to God was the key to unlocking true freedom. When he let go of his need for control, he found that God was far more capable of leading him than he ever had been. James discovered that real power came from letting go, from trusting in God's plan rather than trying to impose his own. As his life continued to change, James found new ways to give back. He became passionate about helping others see the dangers of living a life driven by materialism. He started speaking to young people about the importance of seeking a life of purpose and meaning, rather than chasing after things that would ultimately leave them empty. He shared his own story of transformation, telling others how he had fallen into the trap of greed, and how, by the grace of God, he had been pulled out of it. James didn't just talk about these principles, he lived them. His actions spoke louder than words ever could. Whether it was helping someone in need, offering his time and resources to a good cause, or simply showing kindness to those around him, James became a living testimony of the power of God's grace to change a life. He understood now that true fulfillment didn't come from material success or recognition. It came from a life lived in service to others and in surrender to God. One of the things that James found most fulfilling was the deepening of his spiritual practices. Prayer became the cornerstone of his day. It wasn't just a ritual, it was a conversation with God. Through prayer, James connected with the divine in a way that felt intimate, real, and life-giving. It was in these quiet moments of prayer that he found the strength to face each day and the wisdom to navigate the challenges that arose. The rosary, in particular, became a vital part of his spiritual life. He found solace in its repetitive prayers and the way it helped him focus on the mysteries of Christ's life. As he meditated on the joys, sorrows, and glories of Christ's journey, he gained a deeper appreciation for the sacrifices that had been made for him. It reminded him of the importance of living a life of humility, selflessness, and love, just as Christ had done. James also embraced fasting as a means of growing in self-discipline and detaching from material things. Fasting was no longer a burden, it was a way for him to draw closer to God. It wasn't about punishment or deprivation, it was about redirecting his focus away from the comforts of the world and toward the nourishment of his soul. Through fasting, he learned to appreciate the simple things in life and to trust that God would provide for his needs. As James continued to deepen his spiritual practices, he became more and more aware of the need to share his transformation with others. He began mentoring younger men, guiding them through the struggles he had faced, helping them avoid the traps of materialism and teaching them about the power of faith and prayer. He understood that, just as he had been helped by others during his darkest moments, he now had the responsibility to help others find the same peace and hope that he had found. In many ways, James's journey was far from over. Every day was a new opportunity to grow closer to God, to become more like the person he was created to be. There were still challenges ahead, still moments when he was tempted to return to his old ways, but James was no longer the man he had once been. He had been reborn, and now he was living a life of purpose, one that was rooted in faith, humility, and service to others. Through it all, James never lost sight of one key truth. God never abandons those who seek him with a sincere heart. This truth, which had once been an abstract idea to him, had become the very foundation of his life. He had come to understand, through his own experiences, that God is always present, always working behind the scenes to guide and protect those who earnestly seek his will. This is where you come in. Do you see yourself in James's story? Have you ever felt lost or caught up in the pursuit of things that ultimately don't satisfy? The journey of transformation isn't easy, but it is possible. If James's story resonates with you, I encourage you to take the first step toward a new life today. Start by making a change in your heart. Trust that God will lead you through every trial, and know that He is always there to help you grow and heal. And remember, this channel is here to walk with you on that journey. If you found inspiration in James's story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and join our community of people who are committed to living out their faith with purpose and joy. Let's support one another as we continue on this journey of transformation. If you felt connected to James's story, or if you have your own story of transformation to share, leave a comment below. How have you experienced God's grace in your life? What steps are you taking to trust in Him more? Let's keep this conversation going, and don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories like James's. Your journey starts today. James had learned something invaluable through his transformation: the power of gratitude. Where once he had been consumed by the desire for more wealth, more success, more validation, he now understood that true happiness did not come from acquiring things but from appreciating what he already had. This shift in perspective didn't come easily, and it wasn't something that happened overnight. It was a gradual process, a journey that took time, patience, and reflection. But over time, gratitude became the cornerstone of his new life. James had always taken things for granted. For much of his life, he had been focused on achieving more money, more recognition, more status. He thought that accumulating wealth would bring him happiness, but instead, it left him feeling empty. In his pursuit of more, he had overlooked the blessings that were already in his life: his health, his family, his faith. As he reflected on the pain and loss he had experienced, he began to see that his life had always been filled with gifts he had once ignored or dismissed. The turning point for James came when he decided to take a step back and truly reflect on his life. One evening, after a particularly hard day, he sat alone in his room, contemplating everything he had been through. He thought about the years he had spent chasing after material success, the relationships he had damaged, and the spiritual emptiness that had taken root in his heart. He realized that, despite all his efforts, he had never truly stopped to be thankful for the things that really mattered. James began a practice that changed his life. Every day, he wrote down 3 things he was grateful for. At first, it was hard. He had grown so accustomed to complaining or wishing for more that he didn't know where to start. But as the days went by, he began to notice small blessings that had always been there, waiting to be recognized. He was grateful for the love of his family, the comfort of his home, the beauty of a sunset. The more he focused on gratitude, the more his perspective shifted. His heart softened, and the weight of his past mistakes began to lift. It was in this space of gratitude that James began to rediscover his true purpose in life. As he learned to be thankful for the blessings he already had, he also began to understand that he had a greater purpose than simply accumulating wealth or climbing the social ladder. He realized that his true calling was to serve others, to share the gifts he had received, and to use his experiences to help others avoid the same mistakes he had made. In his newfound purpose, James found peace. He no longer felt the need to constantly strive for more. He was content in the present moment, knowing that his life had meaning, not because of his achievements or his wealth, but because of the love and service he could offer to others. Gratitude had shifted his entire perspective, and in doing so, it had redefined what success truly meant to him. As James began to share his story of transformation, he also began to help others see the power of gratitude in their own lives. He talked about how cultivating a heart of thankfulness had brought him closer to God and to the people he loved. He encouraged others to focus on the blessings they already had, instead of constantly wishing for what they didn't have. Through his own experiences, he showed them that true fulfillment doesn't come from what we acquire, but from what we give, whether that's our time, our resources, or our love. James also started a small group in his community where people could come together and share their stories of gratitude and transformation. They would meet regularly, sharing what they were thankful for and how gratitude had changed their lives. It was a space for people to be vulnerable, to admit their struggles, and to offer support and encouragement to one another. Through these meetings, James began to see the ripple effect of his own transformation. As he encouraged others to be grateful, they, too, began to change. They started to see the goodness in their lives, and as a result, they became more hopeful, more positive, and more generous. In addition to his small group, James began volunteering at a local shelter. It was through his service to others that he truly felt the power of gratitude at work. By giving his time and energy to those in need, he was able to experience firsthand the joy that comes from serving others. Each time he helped someone, he was reminded of how blessed he was. It was a humbling experience that reminded him just how much he had to be grateful for. His work at the shelter became a tangible expression of the gratitude that had transformed his heart. James's journey wasn't without challenges, though. He still struggled with moments of temptation and moments when he felt discouraged. But it was in these moments that his practice of gratitude became his anchor. Whenever he faced difficulties, he reminded himself of the blessings in his life. He remembered the love of his family, the joy of his work, and the strength of his faith. These reminders helped him stay grounded and focused on what truly mattered. He no longer allowed himself to be overwhelmed by the weight of the world. Instead, he let gratitude be his guide. As James's journey continued, he began to see the true purpose of his life unfolding before him. He was no longer consumed by the need to achieve or to acquire. Instead, he found joy in the simple acts of service, of giving, and of loving. He understood that the greatest blessings in life aren't material. They're spiritual, relational, and emotional. The more he embraced this truth, the more peace he found in his life. Gratitude had not only transformed James's heart, but it had also transformed the way he saw the world. He began to see every person he encountered as a gift, every moment as an opportunity to grow and give. His life was no longer focused on his own desires. It was focused on the well-being of others. He had discovered that the purpose of life wasn't to seek fulfillment through material wealth or success. It was to seek fulfillment through love, service, and gratitude. James's story is a reminder that, no matter where we are on our journey, gratitude can change our lives. It's not about what we have or what we've achieved. It's about appreciating the blessings in our lives and using them to serve others. Gratitude isn't just a feeling. It's a way of life. It's a practice that requires intention, but the rewards are immeasurable. When we live with gratitude, we live with purpose, and when we live with purpose, we find fulfillment. Now, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this topic. How has gratitude played a role in your own life? Has there been a time when gratitude shifted your perspective or helped you find peace? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let's continue this conversation together. Also, if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories like James's. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Thank you for being part of this community. As we've journeyed through the transformation of James, we've witnessed a powerful story of redemption, a story that shows how one can overcome the deepest struggles and find true peace in a life centered around God. From a man who was once consumed by greed and material pursuits, James turned his life around, embracing humility, gratitude, and faith. His transformation didn't happen overnight. It was a process of rediscovery, reflection, and commitment. But in the end, he found something far greater than wealth or success. He found peace, joy, and a purpose greater than himself. James's story is a powerful reminder that no matter how far we stray, God's grace is always there to guide us back. It's a call to examine our own lives and ask ourselves, are we prioritizing the right things? Are we allowing our desires to pull us away from what truly matters? The story of James shows us that through repentance, humility, and faith, we can overcome our deepest flaws and find a life that's truly meaningful. This video has touched on the transformative power of faith, humility, and gratitude. But this is just the beginning of the journey. If you found inspiration in James's story, I encourage you to explore even more content like this in our playlist. We dive deeper into the themes of personal transformation, overcoming sin, and the power of faith to change lives. Each video is designed to encourage, challenge, and inspire you on your own path of spiritual growth. If you've been moved by what you've heard today, the next video in our playlist might just be the next step in your journey toward a more centered and purposeful life. I truly believe that the message shared in this video has the potential to transform lives, just as James's life was transformed. And I want to invite you to continue on this journey with us. Don't let the story end here. Click on the playlist and explore the other videos that dive into similar topics. Whether it's overcoming temptation, rediscovering faith, or learning to live a life of gratitude, there's so much more waiting for you. Your transformation might just be one click away. Now, I'd love to hear from you. What part of James's story resonated with you the most? Have you experienced a transformation in your own life that you'd like to share? Or perhaps you've struggled with something similar to what James faced. Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'm eager to hear your reflections, and I believe we can all learn from one another's experiences. And if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. By subscribing, you'll stay connected with a community of like-minded individuals, all striving to live lives that are centered around faith, gratitude, and purpose. You won't want to miss the inspiring content we have coming up next. Your journey toward a more fulfilled and spiritually enriched life is just beginning. Thank you for being part of this community. Your presence here matters, and I'm grateful that you've chosen to invest in your spiritual growth with us. Let's continue to learn, grow, and transform together.